The Obama administration was one of the heaviest handed administration on illegal immigration. They deported more people than almost anybody ever had.
Well, hey guys, welcome back to the show. I got my good friend, longtime friend,
Yeah.
Vince Vargas with me, hanging out, dude. It's always a pleasure, man.
Thank you, brother.
It's
Thank
like
you. It's
we
nice
both
to.
we're both doing our lives and doing our things, and it's like one of those things. I feel like I cannot talk to you for months, and then we may get hop on the phone call because we got a problem, or you got a problem, or I got a problem, or like I know who to call. I'm gonna call my man Vince, and we
Yeah,
pick right
I know.
back up. You know,
I feel the same, dude. My daughter was going through some stuff. I called you. You know what I mean?
and vice
It's
and
just
vice versa. Yeah.
right. Right. That's
Um,
the way it goes.
so how is everybody, man? How's the fam?
Good. Life is life, man. Kids are all going through their own trials and tribulations of how they experience it dating, sports, hardship, grades. They're all going through it right now. We're in the phase of that era of teenage and adulthood. And, we also have the little ones. So everyone's going through life. And I'm just sitting back
You're
watching it all.
yeah, you're hitting all the
Yeah.
stages like all at the same time. You
Yeah,
just
and me, and I'm going through my own stages myself. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, right. Um, well, dude, congratulations on the overall success. Wrapping up Mayans. And then seems like you, and kind of almost timing wise, got this opportunity with the Border Patrol, right? For
Yeah.
those that don't know, Wave Top, they can go back to the other podcasts we've done together or whatever and look back up. But Wave Top, your career of how you ended up to where we're at today, as far as starting with baseball and then kind of all the way to where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, you want me to catch everyone up where we're at right now?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
just kind of like talk about your baseball career in the Army.
Yeah.
But then go move into Border Patrol.
Yeah, my life started with just baseball at 4 years old, and then that kind of led me for many years. Growing up in the LA area, the San Fernando Valley, which is heavy with gangs, it kept me out of that kind of lifestyle because I was driven to play a sport instead of the streets, right? And that was kind of a plan that my father had. He kind of knew keep me busy, would keep me out of kind of those kind of scenes.
Shout out to
And as I
Carlos, right? Carlos the Cut
big
Man.
man, that's the man right there, man, who we speak often. And you know, his life was in the gang kind of space and streets because he didn't want to come home to an abusive father, an abusive drunk father, and so his goal was stay away from getting beat, so stay home, stay outside. You know what I mean? And so, his life was kind of created because of that, and his way of keep me off the streets, keep me active in sports.
Yeah.
And I played baseball, football, basketball, even attempted hockey once, but it was way too early in the morning for any of us to show up to practice. We didn't know that the practice at 5:30 meant 5:30 in the morning. Uh, Mexicans don't learn that shit. So,
Vince,
yeah, dude.
Vince Vargas on the ice. That's something.
Yeah. Went into college playing baseball and played 2 years at junior college and then got an opportunity to go play in Kentucky with a full ride scholarship, which was just a blessing, something that we never saw coming that we hoped would happen. My parents couldn't afford college. If I wanted to, I'm sure they would have helped with something, but they couldn't afford me to really go to college. And so once I lost that full ride opportunity, I ended up joining the military. At the same time, I had a daughter who Isabella, who's now 21, turning 22 this month. She was just barely born, and I was kind of trying to make a decision on what I was going to do in life. But the only thing I knew was baseball, and the only thing I thought I was ever going to be good at was baseball. And so I kind of joined after, watching the war on TV long enough for a couple of years of playing baseball, just deciding that it's something I didn't want to miss out on. It's an experience I was kind of drawn to. Serving the country sounded like the right next step. And, dying for the country felt justifiable. Like,
Yeah.
why not? If I, if I was gonna die for anything, I could have died doing stupid shit I'm doing now. Might as well do it for this country. And my daughter would, if I did die, she would get that $400,000 SGLI. And so I thought, yeah, I'd be a good dad. I'd be considered a good father by supporting financially
Right.
and serving a bigger purpose. And so I joined as an infantryman with the Option 40 contract at the time. Wasn't called Option 40. I think it was just called RGR, like a Ranger contract.
Yeah.
And that was the option to get to Ranger Battalion if you pass selection. And the selection at the time was called RIP. It's currently now called RASP, Ranger Assessment Selection Program. And that will get you into the Ranger Regiment, which is a special operations unit. And it is a tier 2 element. And then that'll kind of put you around this kind of the same individuals that I was hoping to be around. I said, if I was going to go to war, I'd like to go to war with people that want to be at war, who strive to be the best, and, who are willing to take the fight to the enemy. They also, told us that those were 4 to 6 month deployments, so shorter duration of deployments for me sounded good for trying to be a father. And so everything kind of aligned, and I just had a pass. And fortunately enough, after basic training, I realized that the military was probably another thing I'd be good at. Went into RIP, passed that with flying colors. Besides the writing test, we had to do some academic tests, which fucking sucked. I think I failed it once and barely failed it the second time, so good to go.
80 pays the bills.
That's it. And then, during my time in Ranger Battalion, I did 3 tours, 2 to Afghanistan, 1 to Iraq. Learned a lot about myself and learned a lot about what I wanted to kind of pursue after. Saw a couple friends, didn't personally see them, wasn't in the room or anything I'm saying, but lost a few friends that I felt were massive influences in my life. And I knew they had a lot of plans getting out of the military. And so a big part of me was trying to get out and for an opportunity to live out some of those dreams that they had for themselves. And one of those was become a Border Patrol agent. And so I followed kind of the footsteps of what Sergeant Braza wanted to do for himself. He wanted to eventually get to SOG, Special Operations Group, with the Border Patrol. The first job I got out of the military was a prison guard. Did that for 2 years, as short as possible duration so I can get into the Border Patrol. The Border Patrol took me 2 years to get in with a background investigation and everything else. And did the Border Patrol for 2 years as a regular agent, and then the next 5 years was with Special Operations, so I was an SOD, which is Special Operations Detachment out of Del Rio, and then after about 1.5 years, I got laterally selected to go to SOG and to be an SOG, a Special Operations, I would call it operator if you want. That's what they call themselves now. But I taught 3 selections for Special Operations and as well as attached to a BORTAC team. One of the only attached BORSTAR agents, me and Chris Smilo and probably 2 others in the history of kind of the organization. It's kind of taken a lot of twists and turns during that time. But we were the, I guess, trailblazers for blending the teams in the manner where you have a medic attached and embedded. And I mean, in the team, just like you would any special operations teams we've seen overseas. When usually you have a medic attached, it doesn't mean sit in the truck and wait for shit to go down. We're on the assaults, doing the, kicking the doors with them left and right of them. So my specialty essentially was medical, but my background, obviously being an Army Ranger, was infantry. And so they trusted me in the stack with several other guys like that. So after that, I pursued acting, still in the pursuit of it. If you guys watched SWAT last 2 days ago, I was the main bad guy in that episode, season 8, episode 3, called Life. And, I ended up taking a position with the Border Patrol and focusing a lot on journalism currently, trying to help explain.
Yeah, so rewind real quick. Like you left Border Patrol and you got I'd say made a success in Hollywood, more than most 99% of people do, and you're still in that world. But then what was the pull back to? Was it the work with Ironclad? What was the pull your pull back to telling that story and ended up working with the Border Patrol? Like, what was that pull back?
Sitting in this, these cush environments in Hollywood, making way more money than I ever made, working my ass off for the government. You know what I mean? watching the scrutiny that the Border Patrol had through the media, the terrible lens of what they portrayed the career field that I absolutely loved. I never would have left if it wasn't for further opportunities to financially benefit my kids. I never would have left. And so watching them get demonized and scrutinized and fucking, it was hard for me to watch, and sitting in a position of like people bringing me my food and water and shit, you know what I mean? And I was like, what can I do with the platform that I've been blessed with, having a decent following? What can I do? So I decided to write the book. I wrote Borderline. I wrote Borderline, right? And that was my memoir as being an agent from the beginning all the way to the end, being part of special operations, some of the important missions that I was involved in the history of the agency. And it was a way to hopefully rip back a lot of the layers of confusion of what the career field meant and what it does. It was a way to explain immigration that most Americans don't understand, right? They just kind of think it's one thing or the other, and it's a very, very complicated topic. And so I break it down in a very digestible manner. I don't want people to just read the fucking book and learn about the career field that is misunderstood. Yeah. And that pulled me into a lot of conversations. That pulled me into big podcasts like Tell Me More, right? Because you didn't have someone on the Border Patrol's defense speaking on them in a way that I was. You have people that are very argumentative and rah, 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 and then you have the other side, right? So you had your left and your right arguing, but you didn't have someone who was Hispanic, kind of midline of the argument, explaining it in a way that was more educational. And so once I came out with the book, it kind of threw me back into the conversation of being kind of an advocate for Border Patrol, and that put me into kind of a journalism position. And I started getting calls, and I knew I wanted to create a podcast that was going to be, nonpartisan, just let's explain the fucking truth of it, but let's use the experts and let them tell their story. Let's create a platform for experts, essentially. Yeah. So we created Borderland partnered up with Ironclad, who's an incredible company who has been great partners to work with, and they helped me create this beautiful podcast that brings in these experts and lets them tell their piece, and that's been very successful. And that kind of thrust me to the board for hey, since you're doing all this, you interested in working with us? I'm like, let's do it. And so now I created a show that's a kind of a docuseries show for the Border Patrol called that one's called Edge of a Nation, and a podcast we run for them as well called that's Edge of a Nation, and the other one's called Into the Fringe. There you go. Yeah. It's a couple other projects that I'm working with them as well, and some really cool things. Actually, I'd love to do one with you, Nick, a concept I have that would be fun to run with you. We'll talk about it later, but essentially drop you off in the middle of nowhere and let you try and escape from us as we go and try and catch you, and put a camera on you, and you just kind of document how crazy it is that the work that we do.
Don't threaten me with a good time, Vince.
Yeah, we'll plan that out. It'll be cool because, my goal as a journalist for the Border Patrol essentially is to tell the story in a fair light, just show it. I don't need to tell you my opinion of it. Let me just turn on the cameras and let's go to work. Yeah. And, those videos have been very successful for the Border Patrol. We don't talk politics. It's not about the Border Patrol itself doesn't take a political position. The Border Patrol union has, and that's the union itself. That's not the Border Patrol agency. And so people kind of get that discrepancy and they get that wrong. The Border Patrol is an agency. They just serve whoever is, in charge, and the policies that are put into place by, the executive branch and, the politicians who manage that. And that's the policies that we enforce. And so there's been a lot of confusion on how that works and discrepancies on how the career field is supposed to be managed. For some reason, and I want to say this before we get into anything else, is a lot of the world thought that the Border Patrol job was to hold up a shield and push them back into their country. And that idea gave them that we were defending the nation in that capacity, which it's never been that position. Sure. When you tell me to do that, if I'm holding the line on the river and people are trying to come into the country and I'm pushing them back, the idea of that is pretty barbaric. That reminds me of 300, right? The Greek defending. that idea is if I do shove someone and they fall back into the river and then drowned, I'm liable for that death now. And it's just something that our country has not taken a stance on. The truth of the matter is I can say, hey, stop, don't come in here, don't come in here. And they do. Okay, now they have broken a law and now have to arrest them and put them through the process of what we have for the immigration policy that is whatever is upholding at that time. That's the truth. And so when the media goes down there, who's just been so far removed from this idea, now starts to film the concept, people are like, huh, why aren't they stopping them? It's like, well, I don't think you've ever understood the career field in the first place. We've never held up a shield and pushed them back. This isn't a stomp and drag prison yard getting them off the yard, right? It's not like that. And so the discrepancy of that made people really confused on what our job actually entailed. And that's why I wrote the book. Like, well, let me explain it to you. Now that you're paying attention, let me explain it to you. It's
yeah. So when the mainstream media goes in there and just watches them people flooding across, they're like, oh, the Border Patrol's not doing anything.
Right. It's the same as when you put combat camera in combat and then like, oh, why did you kill him? You're like, bitch, we're at war. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like the society wanted to, yes, go to war, but they didn't really want to see war. And when they
Right.
saw war, they were all against war.
Right.
And it's the same concept. When you go see the border, it is not what you had visioned in your head all these years.
Dude, I'm appreciative that you gave me that perception because, like, I don't know. You think it's like to protect the Border Patrol's there to protect the border. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's so many layers to that. In my career, I've saved lives. I won't say taken a life, but I've watched life being taken right in front of me due to a drowning incident.
Yeah.
I have carried babies. I've had friends deliver babies. You know what I mean? The list is so wide of the experiences that an agent has to see in the field because you're not just a law enforcement officer. You're also, doing humanitarian mission.
Right.
You're also a medic. You know what I mean? You're also the immediate response to any kind of traumatic event. It's like this very complex law enforcement position that it's hard to explain. It's very similar to a soldier in combat who was walking the town. And at one point, you're like, hey, and you're giving kids candy or water. And then the next minute, you're like, oh, shoot, now we got to attack this building. It's very similar to like all those hats that we wear as American soldiers with the rules that we carry in war.
Yeah.
We do. Americans have Geneva Convention. We follow this. We have a sense of dignity in combat, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
Which is crazy to say. The truth of war should not be that. But us as Americans, we carry this dignity in combat. That the same thing is what a Border Patrol agent does on a border. Very similar.
So, what years were you in the Border Patrol?
From 2009 to 2015, just at the end of 15 is when I left.
So what was so you were in obviously during the Obama administration. So what was the activity on the border back then during that administration?
Oh, the Obama administration was one of the heaviest handed administration on illegal immigration. They deported more people than almost anybody ever had. At the time, he was building the wall. The wall was being built across the border already, and people hated it. There was people losing their houses that they've had in their lives for generations because it was right on the edge of the border where they decided to build the wall. No one cared back then. It wasn't a news article. It wasn't, there was no backlash between what Obama was doing with building the wall already on our borders. There was a penalty of, if you crossed in the area where I was working, which is the Eagle Pass area, Eagle Pass, Texas, Del Rio sector is what it was. You'd go to jail for 60 days. If you do it again, it'd be, I think it's 6 months. If you do it again, over a year. So people were getting prison time for coming across illegally. I don't care what the reason was. You can even say you're seeking asylum. No one cared. You crossed illegally. Boom. There you go. Now you're applying for asylum. Cool. You'll uphold that asylum case while you're in jail.
While you're in prison.
And then while you're in prison, we'll figure it out from there. And that's how that worked. And so...
But that's still tax. That's still tax dollars instead of immediately sending them back over. That's still American tax dollars.
It's all tax dollars.
Paying for them
no matter
to.
where you cut it.
Yeah.
Yep. Those Those are 3 hot meals. Those are a place to sleep. Those
Doctor
are all
visits,
medical.
medical.
All
Yep.
medical.
Yeah.
Yep. And the facility that hosts them, right? Most of the facilities that were carrying them were private prisons, which is a whole different ball of wax to get into. But those private prisons were taking all the bed space, and so the state was paying the private prisons the money to hold them during this whole process.
And then you left right before the Trump administration. Did you
Yeah.
keep in touch with any of those guys? I mean, I know you were extremely busy. The next thing
Yeah.
you're doing,
Yeah.
like,
But those are family. Those guys are my family, and so yeah, I kept in touch with them. And the Border Patrol morale was high in a sense of they felt that they were doing their job, just like the Obama administration. You felt like you were doing your job. You were actually serving the country. You
Yeah.
were stopping illegal immigration. You were stopping potential threats like I would like to say like terrorist threats. It
Yeah.
wasn't a big thing as it is now. Back then it was like you'd have 8, maybe 9 that were on the terrorist list that you apprehended. Now it's like 150, right?
yeah, but
know what I mean? That are
you felt supported.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The problem was during the Trump administration was that everyone trying to destroy Trump's persona was now shitting all over the agency as well, because that's the problem. So they've had 8 years of nonstop shit from one side or the other. So the Trump administration, the 4 years of that, now all of a sudden the border patrols are getting identified as Nazis, as the the SS that used to
SS,
support,
yeah.
and so they're getting hit now with that jargon. The media jumped all over it. Things like the whipping, the horse whipping, right? That got taken out of context. But then they're like, oh yeah, because this is the Trump, and they kept throwing all the border stuff at the whole Trump conversation because Trump's building the wall, and all of this stuff. And then you had the kids in cages. All that stuff was negative. A negative position for the Border Patrol agents themselves. Their families were disowning them. Their families. This is where the Border Patrol started to have a very bad issue with suicide, where something that me and you are very familiar with in our demographics, right? In our communities, the Border Patrol had some of the highest suicide since that point till now. As per capita of law enforcement, they have some of the highest numbers in suicide rates because everyone around them demonized them for those 4 years. They became the bad guy. And then when the Biden administration came on board, it kind of supported that idea still, and it became like, whoa, this is crazy. And then the media was relentless. The media was looking for every moment they can use to blame the Border Patrol, and that's when I was like, this is becoming uncomfortable for me to watch because this is all false.
What's the truth to, he shares that immigration slide about immigration being the lowest, before he exited. Was that a feeling? Did the Border Patrol feel as if
You're talking about Trump? Trump did a very good job in slowing it down because of his partnerships he had with Mexico.
That was legit. Legitimately,
legit.
Okay, that's a fact. Okay.
The remain in Mexico was a really good thing because as much as we had a massive influx of immigration, the cartel was a big part of kind of push these numbers.
Right.
The remain in Mexico was a really good policy because what it was doing was like making sure the asylum case was legitimate before even saying yes to come into America. Like stay there while we do the process.
Yeah.
That stay there while we do the process was a really good deal that we had with Mexico. And hopefully whoever gets in the office next does it again. They need that. We need that right now. It needs to happen. And that's the big thing. That what he did there was yes, and as well as penalties for people coming in illegally and deportation. Like you got it. I mean, what is the other idea you have? We have to deport them, right? We have to. If you come over illegally, you got to get deported because that's not how this works. They have to be penalized. There has to be some kind of. We can't incentivize illegal immigration, and that's kind of what's happened by way of loophole or neglect. I don't know what you want to call it. But I just without sounding like I don't want to take it in the political direction, but when you have an asylum policy currently that almost welcomes illegal immigration, it becomes a loophole. Well, no
Yeah.
matter how you put it, it's
Do
a loophole
do you
for the
think?
cartel, for whoever.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I want to get to because last 4 years it's just been an influx, and we jumped on the phone recently, and I wanted to get your personal opinion, and they're saying 8 million illegals have come over in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
You're saying you actually think that it's more, right? And you kind of
Yeah.
explain the difference of how it's reporting or not getting reported, et cetera. And I kind of want to answer that question, but then take it back to, was it the loophole policies that allowed upwards of 15 million illegal immigrants into the country?
Yeah. That's what it is. And you say, so how you number those things is going to be different. The federal government will number them like their apprehensions. Yes, those are apprehensions. But if those apprehensions, while during being apprehended, claim asylum, well, then they will be granted the opportunity to the due diligence of the court system doing their part and seeing if it is asylum.
Right.
In that process, they're getting the notice to appears, right? And those notice to appears. This is not a secret. This is all public information. I'm not releasing anything that shouldn't be said. But the notice to appears right now are so backlogged because the lack of immigration judges who are able to see the cases, that people are having to 3, 4, 5 years. I've seen up to 7 years at times. And so in those 7 years of people waiting for their court case to be validated for asylum, some don't show. When I say some don't show, I think the number is somewhere close to 2 to 3% even show up. And so that becomes a loophole in our system. That becomes an issue because we are not able to get a good, I guess, we're not getting to do our part as the immigration process by determining, yes, they're here by way of asylum or not. Because if they're not, then they get deported.
Yeah.
But since only 2-3% show up, well, then the rest of them who don't show up are now they're going to be, they're into the country. They're not following what they're supposed to. So now if they do get arrested at some point for some kind of severe, I don't know, a DUI where they get into a car accident, probably injure someone, at that point they'll determine they're here illegally. Boom, now we can process for deportation. But that can be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. It could be never. Right? And so it's a loophole that I think all the cartel and transnational organizations know, and they're abusing it. And it's not the Border Patrol's job to create policy. Like I said, it's an executive branch.
Right.
And so it is hard to watch us, and I say us Americans watch and be like, man, is this not weird to anyone else? Like, how, like, doesn't this not look strange? And it does. The other side of it is that we have a thing in the Border Patrol that talks about publicly called gotaways. And explain that to people is that, there is no real way of determining how many gotaways there are besides a very kind of rudimentary way we do it. And if I was cutting sign, meaning if I saw footprints of 5 individuals at the border wall, and I tracked them out and they ended at a major highway, and I can see that they don't cross the highway, well then in my best experience is that those 5 individuals got picked up at the road and they got away. We just missed them. It happens all the time. This is very common because how porous, one, our borders are, but two, it's just a vast area to kind of manage with not enough people working, right? And so those are documented. We call them in, and I'll say, hey, operator, this is agent this. When I was in, I'd say, this is agent blah, blah, blah. I got 5 gotaways here at this point. They go, okay, sounds good. Boom. And they track those. So the Border Patrol tracks those. And the number of those are pretty significant. At one point, it was in the somewhere around 3 to 4 million in the past 4 years. And it's not an administration issue. That's a porous borders, high activity. You know what I mean? This is just the reality of, like, this is common. You might have a bigger influx of illegal immigration than we've ever had, so that number would be bigger. But a Godaway, those Gotaways have been, we've been keeping track of that since the beginning of Border Patrol. That's
Yeah.
part of the job.
Right.
Yeah.
So, your personal opinion, you think the number is 15 million could be even lower over the last 4 years, or even it could be higher?
I think 15 million is a good number.
Yeah.
And I think with Gotaways, it could definitely be higher.
So, and we talked about this as well. Where is we hear that that there's a very high percentage of people that are coming across the border that are criminals, either criminals, terrorists, guys that were in prison, psychiatric ward, that they're just countries like Venezuela or somewhere else are just releasing them and pushing them to our border because of this situation, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Go
Is
ahead.
that are they saying that? I mean, obviously you have situations like Aurora, Colorado, right? So if you say something, you're going to go look and try to find the evidence to prove this is right? Which it appears that it is, but what is the actual reality? Is the mainstream media being hyper focused on certain things, or are certain political parties hyper focused on certain things, or is that a legitimate concern because those loopholes, so the countries are, pushing out their riffraff?
It's a legitimate concern because of the massive numbers that have been coming into the border. Excuse me. And the numbers have proven to be way higher than it ever has been in previous years when it comes to the numbers of how many terrorists on the watch list have been apprehended. All the gang influxes have been showing up. But also, I think the biggest indicator of that is the TDA, Tren de Agua, whatever the hell they're called, TDA in short. To see that gang go from nowhere on the spectrum of kind of gang affiliated groups that we're watching to be one of the biggest targets currently right now, and the way they've spread across the nation has been one of the biggest kind of cases that you can say, like, whoa, if that gang, small prison gang, I would say small, it's just a prison gang in Venezuela that turned into one of the biggest hitters we have currently right now, almost outshining some of the Sureño gangs, some of the MS-13 gangs, like outshining them currently. That shows you that the influx of threat to our own security is a big possibility. From the border all the way up to Ohio. I'm talking cities, all Dallas, 20 minutes from me. There was a group found in an apartment building. 4 of them attacked an older woman as well in my area. To know how that has happened in 4 years, that goes to prove that we should be really paying attention to our borders and how transnational organizations, gangs, cartel are using it as a means of entry, but also as a means of, like, how do we continue to exploit? And that's the biggest fear. They're exploiting that. As someone who understands the immigration side and the Homeland Security side, I'm very concerned about the Homeland Security side when it comes to that gang, particularly as a case study of how fast they've gone from zero to boom. Holy crap. I mean, there's FBI agents, there's everyone right now is like, if you're not paying attention to how fast they've expanded, like, that's the biggest threat right now. Like, how did that happen?
I want to put my tinfoil hat on, and it's kind of how we wrapped up that phone call. Was I'm trying to find the motive. If this was an intentional, if you take away those policies and you allow loopholes, and for what appears to be 100% neglect on the current administration, well, the Biden administration, when this launches next week, we might have a new administration, but it seems very intentional, and it seems very neglected. And I have to ask myself, if it is intentional and it is intentionally neglected, what is their motive?
That's a big concern, not just as someone who follows this subject, someone who studies it.
Right.
If I take a backseat from my own biases, I'm just like, who wins? Like,
right.
Like, as in, like, where's the win in this? as a country, I don't see any side, a left or right agenda winning from this idea.
Right.
I see I see a possibility of many little factions being built that kind of destabilize the founding beliefs of America.
Right.
I see organizations hijacking, American, ideologies and using them and flipping them as if they're racist. I've seen that happen already.
Right.
And so I see a slow destabilization of American foundation because a lot of cultures coming into this country don't choose to assimilate to the ideologies. And I see it as a full on kind of, as someone who has a background in psychological operations, like this feels like a long game attack that we for some reason are allowing.
It's funny you say that because Josh and I talk about that a lot. Like we're all trained in psyops. We're all trained in asymmetrical warfare, and it looks like a playbook out of the asymmetrical warfare playbook. And the only thing that I can go back to, and as we talked about this, is which still doesn't make full sense, is that you are creating such a volatile situation in America to where you need military intervention inside of America's walls to keep everybody safe, right? Which they just signed a document that's stating the fact, which is ironic. But then at the same time, it's like, okay, they're just trying to destroy the middle class. They're letting all these illegals in. A lot of people say, oh, it's because they can do illegal votes. I'm like, well, I don't know if that. So sure, they can just steal an election if they wanted to, hypothetically. We're all talking hypotheticals here, right? But then all of a sudden it's like, hey, we have all these illegals in here. We have to create martial law. And then now you have a Venezuelan situation back in, post 1994 where you've got these ruling elites and everybody else is poverty. But I sit back and I go, well, they live off of the middle class and our taxes and the way that we support the country. So you create this socialist dystopia of ruling elites, and then, to me that doesn't seem like a win.
Here's the other side of it. All these people coming from those countries trying to get away from it, they don't want to fucking see it happen again, dog.
Right.
They don't want to see it happen again.
Right.
So then they're gonna be like, hell no. So like, I know there's a big group of Venezuelans that are like, we don't want socialism. We don't want communism. Right. And you guys are leaning towards that. Be careful. And we're getting the warning signs from people from China who are like, we don't want this. You know what
Cuba,
I mean?
Venezuela, people that have lived this life saying this is not,
right.
People that have defected from North Korea. Right.
Look, man, I got to jump, but I appreciate it. Look at God, family, country. That's who I follow, and I'll stay that way till the day I die, bro.
Where can people follow the work that you're doing on the border and reporting on it? And I know your book Borderline. They can get that probably everywhere.
Check out the book Borderline's everywhere. Check out Borderland podcast. It's by Ironclad, and it's an incredible podcast. You guys can go check that out, and then go check out the Border Patrol. They have their own YouTube channel. Go follow that. Subscribe to that. And you guys can see the work I do embedded with the Border Patrol day in and day out.
Excellent, Vince. I love you, brother. Give my love to the family, man.
Thank you so much.
Peace out, man.